Ladies and gentlemen, next up is Loic from Jog, and he's one of the first people who plugged in his audio cable, so we are buckling up for an audio-visual presentation.
Hello, can you hear me fine as well? Awesome. I just have an announcement to make. We have too many t-shirts, we don't know what to do with them, so you know, if you guys want, there's Tim right here that has got you covered. So hello, my name is Loic, and I'm part of the Jog Maps family. 20 years ago, when most people were hearing the word maps, this is what they would imagine. That little piece of paper you'd see in your golf compartment. Back then, making a trip was something you planned in advance at home. Today, it's not exactly the same. Maps have completely reshaped our vision of transit. In fact, they're now everywhere. It's in your building, it's in your train station, it's within your car. Now, maps are in your pocket 24 hours a day. You don't only use them before a trip, but you use them also in real time. When you exit the metro, to be driven home at night, or even to catch the nearest Pikachu. I've got a question to ask. How many of you here have seen or used a map in the past 24 hours? Okay, I know the odds are a little bit bigger than usual in this room, but you know, you get the idea. More importantly, every single one of you here is here in this room because of a map. And when digital maps started to appear, a whole new world of services just started popping out. But someone had to provide those maps, right? This is when the grand public heard about new great mapping leaders, which started to emerge. And when maps become a critical asset for a service, new manners come into play. It could be your independence, it could be your data governance, it could be intellectual property, it could be also some custom needs. This is when OpenStreetMap becomes not just a good, but a great alternative. But then there's one question. Is it business grade? So what does business grade even mean? Amongst other things, a business grade service usually means that it is at least somehow efficient, maybe scalable, available, and then, you know, on top of it, if you can get some elasticity and support out of the box, this is just great. And OpenStreetMap is kind of a great solution, right? We would all love to have those apps, that's for sure, but you know. The licensing model is awesome. It's community driven. And it's been, you know, going on for above 10 years now. But then it gets trickier. The second you try to set up your first map server, right? You feel like you've just opened the Pandora's box. And a few years ago, when we started working with OSM, someone told me, you know, just don't worry. OSM, it's like a stairway. You know, you'd rather take the elevator, we know that. But, you know, once you reach the first step, then you're just going on, and you'll be fine. It took me years to understand what he meant. And I finally got it. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to share with you the first step to OpenStreetMap. And I know you only gave me 20 minutes, and such a question about business greatness would require a decent amount of explanation. And if we had all day, this is probably what we would be covering. But you've been spending the day here, hearing all about those great talks, and I guess that would be too boring. So, you know, we thought with the team, wouldn't it be better to try and show a real-world example that would just prove that an OpenStreetMap application is business grade, in fact. So we decided to change the question, and I apologize for those who were here for the original one. We wanted to answer a really important question. A question that keeps everyone up at night, and a question you may not even have dared to ask yourself. Tonight, together, we are going to answer, can OpenStreetMap services sustain a worldwide zombie infection? Because this is a life and death matter, right? And this is the trailer with music. This is a huge trademark violation right here. So this is it. Zombies have infected Earth. Most cities and big cities went dark, so most services are down. And a community of great OpenStreetMap contributors and developers just released this new app that's called Waze. Waze, obviously, for World Against the Zombie Epidemic. You know, everything that would do something else that you may know of is completely unfortunate. What this app does is that it localizes safe zones and nearby resources. So let's get a little serious. This is our pandemic scenario. 84% of the population contaminated, meaning there is 1.12 billion people uninfected. Because of most big cities went dark, there is only 1% of remaining population with both electricity and network coverage. So we could hope at lunchtime at 8 p.m. A big peak of 1 million potential users, let's say in a ramp of 30 minutes. Basically, when you want to simulate high populations of users, you have to use a scenario and a load testing tool. So this is the scenario. Basically, the scenario will be just a person finding a set of coordinates and zooming in, zoom by zoom, very slowly, and just replicating this over and over to tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of users. The load testing tool we chose is called Gatling. You may have heard about it. It's one of the greatest open source tools. We chose the business version because it has cluster mode, it has great metrics, and it allowed us for live reporting, which we needed for this test. I don't want to get into too much details here, but basically the injectors are what simulates your population of users. And then we wanted to stick to the original OpenStreetMap stack. So this is ImpOSM, ModTile, RenderD, and Squid as a proxy/cache. What changed is that because we wanted to experiment the business greatness, we tried to do an elastic scenario with OVH, meaning that when the demand gets higher, the number of caches and render servers will just add up and will just spawn and arrive in the pool until the pool limit is reached. So there's another video where we are going to see the results all together. So the first thing you do when you launch the scenario is basically upload the scenario details onto a cluster. And then this is the metrics that we are going to look at. At left, it's the number of unique users that you are going to get. This is the test duration. Obviously, we're not going to do real time here. What is going to be interesting is the number of tiles per second, so the throughput and number of tiles the server is giving to users. The renderer is the number of tiles that will be computed in real time instead of just caches. And this is, it just started. And on your right, you got the cache throughput. So this is the amount of megabits per second that is published on the internet. What you can see here is that the population of users is slowly raising. And the number of tiles per second of cache servers will soon hit a limit, because at one point, 2 cache servers is not enough. So we'll see it's about 80K tiles per second, and now the cache server has just been increased. So a new cache server was spawned into the pool and was added as one of the available resources. So now the limits, you can see that servers are getting spawned and spawned one by one. The renderers are also increasing because they reached the limit. So right now, it's been about 3 million users, unique users, that did and finished their scenario in about 19 minutes. Our throughput of tiles per second is about 500K tiles per second, and it will rise and reach the limit to about 660,000 tiles per second. So with 16 cache servers and 6 renderers, we can hope for a throughput of about 600,000 tiles per second in cache and 10,000 tiles per second generated by rendering servers on the fly. What is not the network throughput and the bandwidth is more than 60 gigabits per second. It's a big number. Then we extrapolated the data after 2 hours of test, and this is the total number of tiles that would have been generated per month. So it's about 1.58 trillion tiles generated per month at this rate. So can OpenStreetMap services sustain a worldwide zombie infection? Yes. The objective was 1 billion maps. This is what we promised you. And with our setup, we managed to reach 56 billion maps. Congratulations, Wave successfully saved the planet. Right? Awesome. I mean, you know, it's a big thing, right? In reality, you know, it could seem like a game because it's been my child's dream, you know, just to push things and see how far you can go until a server or a service starts going down. And this taught us a few lessons. We're kind of running out of time, so I won't get into much details. But for instance, OVH, which is our cloud provider that lended us all the servers for the test, we went so high on public activity that we triggered their internal anti-denial of service system, which pretty much quarantined all of our servers in just a few seconds. What we wanted to leave you with is first this bottleneck podium. So in third place comes CPU and I/O. Caching servers without memory caching at this level of concurrency would just do too many I/O reads and would kill your performance. So we need memory caching on cache level. As some of you may know, on database side, the database reads of a worldwide database in PostGIS are enormous, and you at least need an SSD or even in-memory databases on very concurrent instances. The second one comes tile overdraw. So what is tile overdraw? When you have multiple renders, you need to ask, to know which one of them you're going to ask for a tile to be rendered. And sometimes, many people will ask different servers for the same information. And this is a lot of unnecessary work, and this comes by the fact that reverse proxies or proxies such as load balancers are not meta-tile aware. And this is a big issue. And the first one is network. When you rent an instance on the cloud, you usually get 100 megabits per second to 1 gigabits per second of public bandwidth. This is equivalent to about between 1K and 10K tiles per second, and not more. So usually, it is better to have very small caches, but a lot of them, instead of very big caches, because the bandwidth that you're going to require would be much higher. And when you have buffy caches, putting 40K tiles per second on a network interface takes time. Basically, it's a buffer that's serialized on your network interface. It's called IRQ, it's network interrupts, and they become non-neglectable when you get to a very high concurrency level. So now let's talk about the state of the map server. And we wanted to leave you with this general idea. On the historical software stack, in terms of efficiency, there's no debate. With 16 caches and 6 renderers, we can do over 1.5 trillion tiles a month. In terms of scalability, it's still not there yet, meaning the tile overdrawing, for instance, is still something that is a real trouble because we're losing a lot of processing power drawing and rendering the same meta tiles over and over again. In terms of availability, RenderD and ModTile were out in 2008. Those solutions are pretty solid, even though it's based on HTTPD. Who uses that anymore, right? In terms of elasticity, well, RenderD and ModTile arrived and were meant, I guess, for standalone architecture. And this is what most of the community does usually, is we have one render server, maybe it does some cache, and maybe we have a few caches then, but you don't have elasticity, meaning I want to have a renderer and then spawn another one when I have a high demand, which would require a load balancer. So, you know, they thought of a master-slave architecture, but it's not dynamic. And right now, for the past few years, with the clouds, we arrived in a transition where we rely more on dynamic registration, on service discovery, and this is something that the classical stack is not yet very good with. In terms of support, it's a 2-star, meaning it's a bummer. All the open source tools are usually developed by random people, community members, maybe sometimes companies, but there's not one single entity that manages the roadmap, the documentation, and somehow it gets messy. But in the past 10 years, lots of companies have emerged which will provide you with the necessary expertise to bring you the level of support that you need. And we highly advise that you rely on those people when you want to try and make your roadmap services. What we shared with you tonight was just a few % of what we discovered and what we went through. And we wanted to go so much further. This is why we're editing 2 white papers. One of them was released today, and it's mostly about, you know, discovering the main concepts. What is a map? What is a tile? What are all the pieces of the puzzle of a map service? How to combine them together? What are the constraints? What are the challenges? It is not written for especially super techie people. So basically, it's a story of 20 pages that will teach you a lot about map services. The second one is going to be bigger. It's going to take us more time. And we really want to make a thorough investigation into the map services, into creating architectures, isolating bottlenecks, and tell you how to get further and further and further away in terms of performance. And this one is planned on being released in November. We hope that we can get it out by then. Before finishing, I wanted to thank mostly 3 people. The first, it's OVH. They're getting closer to the community of OpenStreetMap, and they're the ones who provided us with all the computing power we needed to bring you this test today. Gatling Frontline, because they spent hours setting up all those stuff and helping us with the scenario nightmares for days. And last but not least, when we started this, we also opened a Pandora's box. And for the past few weeks, the JOG team did double shifts every night, worked weekends, just so we could give this out to you. So if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be here today. So I really want to get a round of applause for them tonight. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Loic?
With your use of ImpOSM, you're obviously not using the same style and stack as OpenStreetMap.org. And the style has a huge effect on rendering efficiency. What were you using?
Basically, OSM-to-PGSQL with the classical OpenStreetMap stack obviously is not the same. Is not the same level because you have lots of details, especially for the contributors. We use a map style and an import profile that's close to what you would see on streets. We used our jog style, which is lighter. It's mostly streets, so you don't have all the amenities on it, but you have most information, housing, houses, house numbers, things like this.
And did you explore render.de features like storing the tiles on Rados, which does eliminate the duplication between re-rendering, as well as pinning load balancing to GUIP, which in your scenario where people are viewing their local area would significantly reduce re-rendering, as well as what were your tile store hit rates, which should in theory decrease as everything gets rendered?
So basically we studied both Rados and Ceph object storage systems. We wanted to just do squid and mem caching mostly because we wanted to get rid of this constraint for the tests. The main reason we did this is because for elasticity purposes and your dynamic registration of host, this would have been a nightmare for us to set up in just a few weeks that we had. So we did as fast as we could. But it would be able to solve some of the tile overdrawing problems, but then we would be in just mod tile render.d architectures, which lack, I guess, modularity. They're too tightly coupled.
They do though, have support already for Rados. It's just,
yes.
I'm not
aware
of anyone who's run it in a production setting.
Yeah, well, we tried with Ceph and we had nightmares. It was a nightmare to try and set it up. So we just said at the end, let's just go with Squid, which is what OpenStreetMap does and uses on their servers.
Unvarnished now, but nightmares in render.d or nightmares with Ceph?
With Ceph, because we use render.d. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Raise your hand high, please. There's one here at the front.
I would be curious only as an idea.
Back in the mic, please.
I would be curious only as an idea if you would replicate this on a vector server, how would it be different, like on this scale?
So, in terms of output, it mostly would be a difference of throughput, meaning the size of a vector tile is usually inferior to a raster tile, so it would probably decrease and lower the throughput, the network throughput. In terms of rendering, the number of metatasks per second, if you use the same import profile, it would be pretty much the same. So you would win maybe on some of the throughput, but other than that, the request per second is pretty much how much your cache can handle rather than anything else.
There's a question there at the back.
Hi.
Hi.
So I run the OpenStreetMap.org caching and the tile rendering with Tom and Paul, who asked you the first question. I would be interested to see some of the network tuning things that you've done. You've clearly got a different problem to us. We are volunteers that run the OpenStreetMap infrastructure, and we don't have cloud hosting options as a choice. We can't just scale up as big as we want, because we do it on a limited budget and we've asked people to donate. So what sort of network tuning have you done? You said RQs is a problem. We've suffered from similar problems where the networking stack starts to
I'd be happy to share everything with you. There's also, I mean, maybe it's too early to announce, but OVH is getting closer to the community and they're planning on helping, I guess, in terms of server processing power. So that might also be something that might get your interest. So don't hesitate, we could share some ideas.
Cheers.
Sounds interesting. All right. We have maybe time for one last question, if there is any such.